So Natalie's eyes remained black. After a couple of weeks of pretending that things were okay, I tried talking to her about the whole situation, but she would always find a way to skirt around the conversation. Things have never really been the same. We eat dinner in silence. I wake up at night and find her staring at the ceiling. But enough was enough. I couldn't continue to live on like this. I needed to find a way to fix things. And the only way I knew how was to go back to that disturbing house. I sat down with Natalie and we had a long conversation about everything that had happened. And she reluctantly agreed that we needed to go back to the house. Whatever these sisters were, we needed to confront them. So before we headed to the house, we came up with a plan. A lot of you guys suggested that mirrors might help, so I made sure to bring a mirror with me. I mean, at this point, why not? Additionally, knowing how dark it was inside the house last time, I bought some night vision goggles. Now the question about whether Natalie would accompany on the trip or not. Considering that she has been my savior every time, we decided it was best that she went with me. However, I was not going to let her enter the house under any circumstance. I've also taken your suggestion on making sure that it is her. Even though Natalie has been significantly quieter than before, I make it a point to ask her numerous questions and expect answers to make sure it's her. I can see the sadness in her eyes. Now she knows that I've lost the complete trust I used to have in her. But she complies and responds to my questions, knowing it's the only way I can keep a straight head in this entire situation. We arrived at the house at 11 a.m. in broad daylight. Not that it made a difference, since the house was dark as ever inside. Since it was a pretty remote area, I didn't feel bad hooking up a chain to the front door and pulling it off with my truck. I wasn't letting any door close on me this time. I had Natalie stand about 10 feet away from the door frame so that she could still see me as I walked in. My theory was that these sisters seemed to be unable to face her, so as long as I maintained a good line of sight with Natalie, I half-heartedly hoped they wouldn't appear. With my night vision goggles activated, I stepped into the house with Natalie nervously calling out from behind. "Be careful, honey." Even though so much has happened, I still found a sense of comfort in her voice. "It'll be alright, I promise. We'll fix this," I called back. The air was heavy inside the house, and I found it slightly hard to breathe. But nevertheless, I had planned for this for quite a few days, and I wasn't about to back out. I saw the symbols again on the walls, and I pulled out my phone and took some pictures. Everything in the house was trashed and dusty except a small cupboard on the wall across the living room. So far, I had been walking in a straight line, maintaining vision with Natalie. But this cupboard seemed odd. It had too many symbols around it, and it was the only object in the house that seemed to be untouched. There had been no sign of the sisters. "I'm going to check something out really quickly. I'll be right back, okay?" I called out to Natalie, who shook her head. "Oh, okay. Please just hurry. I want to leave already." I sprinted across the room and looked through the drawers. All were empty except the last one, which had a small pocket-sized leather-bound diary. I immediately put it in my pocket and started to head back. Just then, I turned around to find the smiling face of my wife, with a glass of water in her hand and eyes that looked greener than ever. Honestly, for a moment, I admired her beautiful green eyes, only to immediately snap out of it and realize this was the entity I was facing. I slowly began to walk past it in an arc. Just as I passed her, "Is everything okay in there?" Natalie yelled from outside. The moment the sound of her voice reached me, I heard a glass shatter behind me. I knew what was going on, and in that adrenaline-filled moment, I said, "Screw it. I'm going to give this a shot." I pulled out the mirror, turned around, and held it in front of its face. Now I could see her through my night vision goggles, head tilted, grinning. It let out a scream and shattered the mirror in my hand. I slowly began to back up towards Natalie's line of sight, eyes closed shut. Just when I thought I was almost there, I bumped into someone. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder and a face right next to mine. "You came back to us," it whispered in my ear. The most disturbing part wasn't that my eyes were closed. It was the fact that it sounded like 5 people were saying it at exactly the same time, with some deep and some higher pitched voices. Then I felt another hand as I was swung around to the ground with a force I could not comprehend. As I fell, I crawled towards what little light was coming through the door. I barely got far enough to see Natalie screaming outside and running towards the house. "Stop! Natalie, stop! Don't come in!" I yelled as she halted a couple feet from the door. "No, no, no! Not you two! They can't have you too! They said they wouldn't." At the time, I didn't really pay attention to what she said. I felt a hand holding my foot, knowing they were trying to drag me out of her vision. I noticed my phone had fallen out. At this point, I became very dizzy and reached to unlock my phone. Even though it was dark, Natalie's face lit up on my phone screen background, her beautiful green eyes radiant as ever. I gave her one last look as I began to pass out. But right before, I felt the hand on my foot release. I woke up at the hospital. As my blurry vision became clear, Natalie jumped at me and gave me a hug. "Oh God, thank God you're okay. Can you see? Look at me, can you see?" As she moved back, the first thing I noticed were her green eyes. They were just as radiant as they used to be. "Your eyes," I mumbled. Natalie let out a scream of joy when she realized I could see. Yes, honey, my eyes are okay. I feel like myself now. Everything is okay." I had so many questions in that instance, but the doctor insisted that I rest. The next morning, while the doctors were completing all the paperwork for my discharge, I spoke to Natalie about what happened at the house. She explained that I was falling unconscious. She ran into the house only to see that the sisters were staring at my phone screen. The instant Natalie saw them, they looked up at her. After a brief stare, they disappeared. She also told me that as she was pulling me out of the house, it started crumbling and collapsed to the ground as we barely made it out. Really? I thought to myself. Was it that simple? Then I remembered about the pictures I had taken in the house, and I reached for my phone to look at them. "What are you looking for, love?" Natalie asked as she saw me desperately going through my photos. "I took some pictures in the house, but I can't find them," I replied as I wondered what happened to them. I don't remember you taking any pictures." She grabbed my phone and slid it in her purse. "But we'll worry about that later. I'm just so glad you're okay." And she gave me a hug. She was acting a little strange. Did she delete the pictures from my phone? I noticed my jacket hanging on the door, the same one I had worn when I went inside the house. I walked over to put it on. "It's chilly in here." I smiled at Natalie. Just then, the doctor called for her to sign some papers, and as she turned away, I immediately felt my inside pocket. I could feel the small leather diary. Ever since we've been home, Natalie has constantly been by my side. Quite literally. The only time I was not with her when I went to use the bathroom. I pulled out the diary and looked at the first page. Herein lies what little knowledge we have gained over generations since the birth of the sisters. I was about to flip the page when Natalie started banging on the door. "Are you okay in there?" "Yes, I'm fine, honey. Be out in a bit," I yelled back. Something's not right. She won't leave me alone for one bit. Not to mention what she said before I passed out. She knows something and won't tell me. But I don't want to confront her just yet. I went to work today and tried to read the diary whenever I got the chance, but I had a busy day. The story's quite long, but I'm getting close to finishing it. Earlier today, I left work a couple hours early and drove over to the supposedly demolished house. What I saw disturbed me. The house was burnt to the ground, as if someone had deliberately set fire to it. Why would Natalie lie to me? Did she set this house on fire? I'm also starting to doubt a lot of what she has said recently. Natalie keeps calling for me to come to bed, and I am in my study writing this update. I keep lying, saying I'm writing something for work. I also told her I have to go into work tomorrow morning for a few hours to make up for the time I was in the hospital. She bought it, and I'll be going over to a coffee shop instead to finish reading the contents of the diary.